Tonight's session is called Reinventing and Revaluing Projects in Changing Times. We're absolutely thrilled to be joined by representatives from Crystal Palace Transition Town, Hythe Environmental Community Group, and Transition Town Wellington to hear how their projects are adapting to recent events, to the pandemic, and to the upsurge of concern around climate change. Tonight's conversation is going to be focused on the voices of those within the transition movement. Transition groups can now be found in thousands of communities in over 50 countries. Our focus here today has been on initiatives in England and Wales, but the insights and learnings will, we hope, be relevant to people working for change anywhere. And a little hello, I know we've got some people here internationally, so I think we've got the US, we've got Canada, Portugal, and also Iran. So welcome to some of our international participants. We're joined tonight by Karen Jones and Laura Marchant-Short from Crystal Palace Transition Town, Chris Turnbull of Hythe Environmental Community Group, who have very kindly stepped in at short notice as a replacement for Deal With It. They were scheduled to be part of the session, but they've got the brilliant excuse of being far too busy harvesting hops. It's key hop time right now. So we're really grateful to Chris for stepping in. And we've also got Anita Roy and Helen Gillingham of Transition Town Wellington. So welcome to all of our speakers. So we're going to start by giving each of our groups and our speakers tonight 10 minutes to give an overview on your group, on the work that you do, and your reflections on this theme of thinking big and building networks to mobilize communities to rethink the future. So Karen and Laura from Crystal Palace Transition Town, over to you to get us started.
Okay, here we go. I'll just share my screen.
Hello, we're Laura Marchant-Short and Karen Jones from Crystal Palace Transition Town. We lead on the food market, one of the biggest transition projects in Crystal Palace. And here we are pictured visiting one of our organic farmers, Patrick Brockman. Tonight, we will be talking about two transition projects in Crystal Palace. The Crystal Palace Food Market, which is our project, which we both set up and manage, and the Library of Things, a project that is a partnership between Crystal Palace Transition Town, the local library, and the Library of Things. The food market started trading in 2013 and has traded weekly for the last 7.5 years. It was started by Crystal Palace Transition Town using Permaculture Principles, and we started with 11 stalls. Just before lockdown, this had grown to about 30. We support small sustainable farms and fishermen, as well as ultra-local food and artisan stallholders, and have mentored countless locals, many turning into successful stallholders. We do this to increase our own community's resilience rather than bringing stallholders in from other areas. We've received many awards, the most prestigious being listed as the top 3 markets in the BBC Food and Farming Awards in 2015.
The Library of Things, the other project we're going to talk about, was set up in June 2016 in West Norwood in South East London, and then it moved up to Crystal Palace in April 2018. A Library of Things is things that you can borrow rather than buy. Crystal Palace Transition Town fundraised within the community, and that's what enabled the Library of Things to move to Crystal Palace. And we act as the link to the community within that partnership. Our local library provides the location for all the things, and the Library of Things team provide all the things themselves and the expertise to lend them out and maintain them properly. Both of these projects were to be massively impacted by the COVID-19 lockdown. So let's start with the market. This is a picture of a typical Saturday before COVID arrived. Note how all the stalls face each other, how narrow the gap is between them to walk through the market. Obviously, this was not going to work in the pandemic. So after the market on March the 21st, we closed down. We just did not feel safe. So what to do next? We did what we always do with any problems, go back to permaculture principles. This allows us to be agile and gives us a framework in which to problem solve. And some of the principles really applied. Creatively use and respond to change. How can we use this to our advantage? Apply self-regulation and accept feedback. We recorded everything that was happening, and we listened to feedback from all the stallholders and customers. Use small and slow solutions. Don't try and do massive things.
Relationships were really important. We wanted to protect the relationships with our farmers and our fishermen and our community. The logistics, we wanted to protect as many as logistics, any decisions had to be sustainable and doable for all parties for long term, as we had no idea how long the lockdown would be, and we still don't know. Safety, we needed to keep both the customers and the stallholders really safe. We've had a transition town in Crystal Palace since 2011 and have run many projects. This means people trust us. We have a lot of communication channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, newsletters, and we have a lot of relationships and can draw on lots of knowledge from different areas. So what did we come up with? After a week of going through a really tough week, we have to say, of going through different responses and going back and forth and trying to decide what we were going to do, this is what we finally decided upon. Different stalls on different days. 1 or 2 stalls a day with managed queues and cling film barriers on the stalls. We chose a location in the market away from any houses where we could accommodate our long queue. Here's a list of the actual stalls on our blackboard. This changed all the time under our local T-Rex. A local company called Media Gang knew we were worried about the queues and offered to put circles 2 meters apart to accommodate them. And this is what the queue looked like. You can see the stall at the bottom and everyone, well, almost everyone, standing in the circles. And at the bottom of the screen on the road, you can see this was done by Media Gang. When I is replaced with we, even illness becomes wellness. That's a Malcolm X quote. In fact, the queues were really long all the way up the hill and the stalls became really popular. We still needed to be on site to monitor the queues, and we did that ourselves. And it seemed like we were there forever with people in our face about Boris Johnson and conspiracy theories and everything all the time. It was exhausting. So we took it in turns, and we ran the lockdown market like this from the beginning of April until the beginning of June. But what about our local stallholders? Well, many of them were offering a local click and collect delivery or collection service. This is our cake maker, Joe Brett from Brett and Bailey, who's he's our very first trader that ever signed up with us. We started Slice Saturday service. Here he is delivering all the orders on one of the Saturdays. And there were many others as well. We used our communication channels to help promote them, to help them to survive. And actually so far, none of them have gone bust, which is amazing. And we continue to send out a weekly newsletter to all our subscribers, highlighting what they were up to. So what we achieved, we maintained our relationships with the farmers and fishermen. We supported their livelihoods as well as our local traders through our promotions. And of course, we managed to support our own livelihood as well. We kept a supply of healthy food coming into Crystal Palace every week, and we saved the market. Without this intervention, we would have gone under.
And then on June the 6th, we had to reopen, but we had to rethink the market because now we are in a post-COVID time. So what did we do? So we turned all the stalls sideways instead of facing into the centre, and we allowed space for individual queues. We reduced the number of stalls right down so that we actually halved the number of stalls that we had. We marked all the queues with chalk, and you can sort of see that in this queue. And we used our teenage volunteers, of which we have many. We put tabards on them and got them to direct people to the correct queues. And we also made sure that the market can continue in this form, even in another lockdown. And for your interest, this was our first ever map. These are all the queues that are marked for each individual stall, so we knew we could have individual queues, and it has improved a lot since then. In fact, if you look at the 4 stalls that we put on the end, that veg stall, meat stall, another veg stall, and the fish stall, we put them next to the roads so that we could take the queues onto the pavements on the roads, the long queues. And that's another permaculture principle called using the edges. Here's a picture of the market today with staggered stalls turned sideways and with individual queues, and it allows for proper social distancing. We're as busy as ever, but we're safe in COVID times. The next project is the Library of Things. The Library of Things is housed in our public library shown in this picture. And this is what it looks like inside.
We've just got 2 minutes now. Just going to give you a little 2-minute warning.
Everything's installed in these compartments. There's a touch screen for collecting and returning all the booked items. However, on the week of the 22nd of March, the library suddenly closed, stopping all access to all the things. But demand for things was really high. Everyone was at home wanting to fix things, clean things, put up things. They wanted drills, carpet cleaners, pressure washers, exactly what the Library of Things had. So the team had to put their heads together and come up with a plan, and they did. Things on Wheels. This went into operation on the 12th of May 2020. But it did take quite a long time to develop. All the things had to be moved from the library to Big Yellow Storage. All the things had to be quarantined for 72 hours between lending out and needed proper cleaning. Volunteers had to be found and scheduled to deliver and collect all the things. These turned out to be mainly people on furlough with cars, and all the technology and software had to be put in place to accommodate these new systems. However, it has been really successful. Many items got booked out solidly, including all the ones I mentioned, and it's ensured the survival of the Library of Things at Crystal Palace. So, it's been creative thinking that saved our projects, with permaculture principles helping us along the way. As Julia Burnham Fox says in Sustainable Revolution, one of the most important things about permaculture is that it's founded on a series of principles that can be applied to any circumstance.
Of course, permaculture is the basis of Transition Town. Being a transition town since 2011 has meant we have built lots of community resilience, lots of contacts and lots of expertise. People trust us, people want us to succeed, and we are. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's such a wonderful example of the adaptability and the resilience that was already built in to the group, and the trust. It seems really key, that question of trust within the community. I'm also loving the T-Rex. I noticed you put tabards on the teenagers and not the T-Rex, but I'm loving the T-Rex. Thank you so much for your presentation. We'll be coming back to you shortly as we go to questions. But now we're going to hand over to Chris, who is a representative of Hythe Environmental Community Group. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks very much. Can you hear me okay? Yep, excellent. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and stick up a presentation as well, which hopefully will be that. So anyway, Hythe Environmental Community Group. Yeah, we're Hythe, a small town down the south coast. This is for the people in Canada, etc. Down the south coast near Folkestone, not far from France. We were a transition town, transition Hythe. We reformed in 2017 with the Hythe Environmental Community Group name. And we've now grown under a sort of umbrella, about 5 subgroups. And really the messages of the group are community-led, sort of growing internally, reducing waste in all forms, in which leads us on to Gleaning, which I'm going to talk about in a little more depth later. Looking after and appreciating our environment, and something that rather strikes a note with this set of talks tonight: encourage a return to sustainable living through forgotten and abandoned initiatives.
I'm going to stop you for a second, Chris, because I don't think your screen sharing's quite working.
Is it not? That is okay. Hang on a minute. Right.
See, we practiced before we got on here, and then there we go. That's wonderful. It's working now, Chris. Okay,
that's cool. Then that's okay. So that's the slide you missed. So going into the five groups, we've got an energy group, which is organising talks, visits. We've got an infrared camera, which we take round doing free surveys of people's houses to highlight the heat losses. We've got a waste group which does litter picks, visits to recycling plants, and sort of education and guidance on recycling. Flora and fauna group, which has some wonderful experts who give their time to taking us on bird and butterfly walks, moth evenings. We're creating a community orchard, and we work with bumblebee organisation to monitor bumblebee populations and carry out wildflower surveys in the area, trying to improve the food available through the year. We've got Hythe hops. We're talking about hops earlier. We've just been doing our harvest. We'll come back to that in a minute. And we've got a food group, which is what we're really talking about tonight. Gleaning at the top of that, going back to in more detail. Apple pressing, we do an apple pressing event in Hythe High Street. We do seed, plant and produce swaps in Hythe High Street, and we organise some pruning and grafting courses. So, and apologies if I'm rushing through this because I haven't got to the main nub of the presentation. But Hythe hops, this was a fantastic initiative. Our friends mentioned earlier deal with it just around the coast from us, and they had a lot of success picking up this initiative. We'll go into it in a little bit, but they helped us set up last year, 2019. We got 83 members in that first year, growing hops in gardens and allotments, social events organised, had a lot of fun. 125 hop plants grown, 31 kilograms harvested, and 2 draft community green hop beers produced, which were delicious. And this year we've grown that to 125 or 120 growers, and as you can see on there, and again a green hop beer, but we're also teamed up with someone who can beer. And we're drying some hops as well, so that we can brew later in the year. So that's Hythe hops. So gleaning, which is what I was really supposed to be talking about. Not a new concept. Back to biblical times, if you know your Deuteronomy, where really you were told the farmers were told to deliberately leave part of their harvest for the poor and the needy. This turned into a law, which until the 18th century required farmers to allow local people to come in and gather the leftovers, and that supported the poor of the community. And you can see that wonderful picture of the gleaners at work from Millet. So why now? COVID. Well, that had 2 effects really. First of all, it put a lot more people, and is putting a lot more people, in food poverty. More people unable to get to the shops, self-isolating, and also from a Hythe environmental ECG point of view, a lot of our activities had to stop, and this was something which could make a big difference and could be done, albeit with some difficulty with COVID restrictions. So we focused on that. Other reasons why not? Schools, more child poverty, which has a direct effect on learning and well-being. It's fun, so it's always worth doing. And that in its own right brings the community together, and a group of gleaners, our recipients, they all feel part of a team. So in difficult times, I think it assures people that they are not alone and they're not forgotten. Someone's thinking about them, they get a little food parcel or package, which they couldn't have got otherwise, and they're very grateful. And it also underlines the message in terms of waste, that there are things we can do to reduce waste and that we should value what we have. So what's the structure of the network? there's an interesting organisation, Feedback, who are a global organisation whose motto is working to regenerate nature by transforming our food system. They have an online toolkit which you can use to help set up a hub. And a lot of our group did actually go out gleaning before we set ourselves up as a hub. We went out with Kent Gleaning Network, which was part of Feedback. We are now trying to encourage other local groups. There's a group in Deal, which we work with, and we're also trying to set up groups in Dover and Thanet along the coast. There's a reasonable amount of poverty in these areas, and it's something that can be done and will make a huge difference. The network itself, Feedback, allows stepping up of distribution. We just distribute locally to Hythe and Folkestone, but the network enables, if there is a big opportunity, they can organise people to come down from London and take huge amounts back, which is far beyond our distribution capability. So what do we get up to? So we're harvesting produce that is not economical for the farmer to sell, and which we take back home, distribute to food banks and organisations supporting the needy and those in food poverty. We're going out once a week usually. Unfortunately, most of the farms are within about, well, they're the other side of Canterbury, so 40 minutes drive away. All our recipients in the Hythe and Folkestone area, and typically we're bringing back a ton of produce each week. We went gleaning today and brought back over a ton of potatoes, cabbages and apples. We've shifted about 12 tons since April. Usually this is only about 6 to 9 gleaners going out. Got a list of about 32, but as usually with these things, there's a hardcore who turn out regularly. And we're distributing to about 20 different recipients, which I'll come to later.
I'm going to give you a little 2-minute warning there, Chris.
Okay. Sources of the product, we've got some fantastic farmers who we work with, currently only about 5, and growing, but we can pick up a lot of stuff from there. I won't run through the list there, you can read it. And we're also getting into urban gleaning, which again tries to stress to people the avoidance of waste, and particularly food waste. So we're going out into people's gardens and picking their trees if they're not going to be using them. Where did it go to? It's going to the food banks, it's going to Salvation Army, it's going to the COVID hubs, it's going to things like the Women's Refuge and Kent Refugee, and it's also going to the schools. So there are schools who are talking about child poverty, they're setting up their own food banks, and they also set up breakfast clubs for kids that aren't given breakfast before they arrive at school. And so that is an area which now they're back at school, we expect to expand dramatically. So that's really it in a nutshell. Anybody who wants more information about us as a group, you can go on a website, or if you're interested in following up with us, then drop us a line. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much for that, Chris. I see Hillary's just put that in the chat she didn't know that was the original meaning of the word gleaning, and I have to say I really didn't know that it was common law. So that's really useful to have the history and also what's happening now. And I'm sure Marcus Rashford would be incredibly proud of all the work you're all doing to keep school children fed, as well as other members of the community. So I think it's been really inspiring during the pandemic, following the work that you've been doing on social media. And I'd imagine it's quite a workout for all of your volunteers, lifting a ton of cauliflowers in a day. So I'm sure the Prime Minister would be pleased about that as well. People are keeping fit. So thank you so much for that, Chris. We'll be hearing more from you in a short while. And now I'd love to welcome Anita and Helen of Transition Town Wellington to share some of what's been happening with them with us right now.
Thank you very much. Gosh, this is all very inspiring. So many great things to get going on. So I'm Anita Roy. I'm going to be basically doing the tech backup and clicking through some nice pretty pictures for you, while Helen tells us about all of the community gardening and projects that we've been doing down here in the Southwest.
Thank you. We were really finding, since we started in 2008, so we've been going about 12 years, that Greta's protest and then the IPCC report and then the Extinction Rebellion have really started to get more and more people interested in our group, and more people were joining. So our projects, such as we were doing seed swaps and apple juicing and things like that, and starting to work with the council to plant fruit and nut trees around the town, all of these projects suddenly had more volunteers and more interest. And as of February, it was a year since we started doing the Repair Cafe, and it was all getting very exciting. We planted a load more trees at a new site in the December through to March, and then lockdown happened. And as fellow gardeners, I'm sure anybody will realise it was in March, just at the point where you're starting to plant everything. So I just started doing the talks on how to grow your own veg and the first practical talk down my allotment, and suddenly everything stopped. So I think we all just kind of froze for a minute, trying to digest what was happening. But I kept going down my allotment until we had a horrible 5 hours of where the council basically sent us an email chucking us off the allotments. And we all complained a lot because Michael Gove had just said that it was part of our daily exercise. And the food security was so much in the media at the time about whether we would have the amount of pickers to pick crops in the fields and everything. So I had a pretty panicked 5 hours, and you can see the picture of my lonely wheelbarrow where I tried to put as much stuff as I could put in a wheelbarrow to take home. And however much I was panicking about how little room I had at home, I looked at that wheelbarrow and I thought, God, this is a lot more than a lot of people have. You know, I've got seedlings growing, I've got pots. What about people that don't have an allotment or don't have a garden? So I decided to take the veg growing talks online. So we started a series of how to grow your own vegetables in your garden Facebook posts, and different members from our group all chipped in and sent in pictures, and that went really well actually. But then I thought, well, I feel so privileged to have an allotment, and it's like a little sanctuary away from all this COVID nightmare. But I shouldn't feel privileged, because it should be everybody's right to have an allotment. And so it sparked another project that we could thankfully do digitally, and we'd been able to have time to do more networking actually with other groups. So we started working with Transition Town Taunton and the Taunton Environment Network, and started off an allotment project. So to start with, we just realised that how much of a secret society allotments seem to be, and how nobody seems to know where they are or who to contact. And there wasn't a comprehensive list of all the allotment sites in Taunton Deane. So we got cracking and created a list of 29 allotments to find there were 1,416 plots in Taunton Deane that are all full. And there was 198 people on the waiting list. So in order to try and get evidence of need for the council to petition governments and things like that, we created a survey to go with the promotion of all these different contact sites. Lovely 172 people have answered the survey now, which is great, and we've started to analyse it. We have over 12,000 people have looked at the most recent Facebook post. And really, it wasn't a massive amount of promotion that we did. I just wonder how many people would want an allotment if we actually managed to get it out there to all the different community groups and things. So I've got a 15-minute with our local MP tomorrow on Zoom to push her to try and get more allotments. I'm giving the survey results to the strategy specialist in the council to rewrite a better allotment policy. So hopefully we can get more local food growing and more space to grow, because we don't have the space in our gardens so much anymore. Other things that were happening at the turn of lockdown were we have over the last 5 or 6 years been planting fruit and nut trees around town. You can see the circled areas are reasonably small sites apart from the established orchard that the Swains Lane team are running in conjunction with us. But Longacre was the project that we started just before lockdown. We planted 50 new trees and 50 bushes in a forest garden kind of layout. And then, of course, lockdown happened. We were worried about whether we could go out as a group, you know, whether it would be acceptable. Everybody was supposed to be in their houses. There was a big drought. We just had all these trees planted. So I asked the council's permission, because we're working with them, it's their land, whether we could have community gardening sessions. And unfortunately, because they'd had a complaint with another gardening group in Taunton, we weren't allowed. So they did, after about a month of wrangling, allow me to go out on my own with my scythe and try and keep down some nettles.
I'm going to stop you for a second there just to say I don't think your slideshow's currently working. So we're still on the first slide. So sorry to interrupt you, but the audience is crying out for the slideshow.
Yeah.
Oh,
My beautiful slideshow. What is wrong? Hang on. Shall I just stop the share and then try it again?
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
I don't think you had it on presentation.
Man.
So anyway, I'll carry on talking, otherwise we'll run out of time.
Okay.
Essentially, I was trying to do it on my own, and we realised that if lockdown continued, we were going to need to try and find out a new way of doing our community gardening sessions. So luckily, we were in contact through the Taunton Area Environment Network with somebody from Long Run Meadow, who gave us the really simple idea of using a WhatsApp group, said it worked really well for them. And it's been a bit of a revelation, actually, because everybody now has kind of a bit more control. We can all post pictures of what we think needs doing, go out and have many more different community gardening sessions. And something that was really lovely was we gave some bog wildflower seed out in a pop-up shop back in January, because we're working on the pollinator action plan to help with wildlife in the sites that we're managing as well. And I put a little message out there saying, anybody remember these seeds? Is anybody growing them? And luckily, people came out from the woodwork with their bog plants. So now we're allowed to start doing our community gardening sessions again, just with 6 people, which is a lot more limited than it was. We were getting up to 30 people at a time before. But we've been building hibernaculums and things like that with the scouts and getting back going into the session. So I'm going to pass over to you, Anita.
I'm just going to give you a 2-minute warning as well. We've just got a couple of minutes.
Yeah. The slides are really, really fantastic. Oh my God, you would have loved the slides. They're just great. They show so many people all coming together, working together on these projects. I suppose the main thing that we wanted to get across to people was that over the course of the last year, but particularly since COVID, I think what we've tried to do is to work really, we've really begun to spread our networks out, work with a lot more different groups, particularly with the allotment project. We found that the council, I think if anyone approaches a member of the council, their town council or their district council, and actually does some proactive, like we're doing this, like Helen did with the allotment project, you'll find a huge, huge welcome from those people, many of whom are under-resourced and overstretched. So for us, the lesson from lockdown, one of the main lessons is work with other people, be proactive, take decisions on your own, and you will find people helping you and snowballing. So with the allotment project, we've definitely found that. And with the community gardening, where we started a couple of years ago with a small site, the Longacre site that Helen was talking about, which there are some fantastic pictures of, which you can't see. So you'll all have to come to Wellington to enjoy the garden. It's beautiful. And we are working very closely with the District Council on another future project, which lockdown has actually enabled us to put a lot of the logistical stuff in place. So we're hoping that this is only going to grow and grow. And yeah, Transition Town has become quite a kind of key, I think, player within the area. And lockdown, I think, was like taking a snapshot underneath the forest where you just see mycelium. So it's all about the idea that we are individuals, or even that we're individual groups, is just a myth. We are nourished, and we are nourished, and we are nourishing everyone in the network. And that's something that I think a lot of people have found very, very encouraging, actually, that sharing and like sharing of nutrients on both sides. Yay. So yay. Sorry about the tech stuff, crap at that. But anyway, come to Wellington and we'll show you around.
Thank you so much, Anita and Helen. I think you dealt with that technical difficulty with absolute grace. And it was really wonderful to hear and see a snapshot of the work that you've been doing. And I think it's really telling, isn't it, that the kind of allotment movement and allotmenteering, how historically it's always come to its own in a crisis. So I think World War II was definitely a time where allotment felt really crucial for people in the UK. And it's of no surprise that during this pandemic, yet again, allotments are really coming into their own. So thank you so much. And we'll be hearing some more from you both shortly as well.
Thank you.
From all of our speakers so far this evening, there's so much richness. There's a lot of great compost in there, isn't there? And lots for us all to think about. I'll get us started with a question for our presenters today. And so we're going to invite you to start putting questions in the chat. If new questions start forming or comments, please just go ahead and put them in the chat at any point. But I'm going to start by asking those who've been presenting for us today to share with us something from the other talks that have really resonated with you, or that you'll be taking away with you from this session. So Karen, Laura, I'll start with you folks. What's really stood out for you from what you've heard this evening?
Oh yeah. So with the Chris with his Hythe talk, I think the thing that stood out with me is how many connections that there are within that transition town, with all the different charities, with all the different farmers, with all the different gleaners. It was just really struck me how many connections are involved in that, and every relationship is work, and every relationship needs looking after. So that was really impressive. And with the transition town in Wellington, again, it was that idea of community, and I love that concept of the mycelium. I love that. Yeah.
And the thing for me and Hythe, just to add to that, was in particular that nobody gets forgotten, and that's really reaching out to people who are cast adrift in society, really, and people don't know who they are or where they are, and to have those people feel that someone's seeing them is more powerful than even the food. I think it's great.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Chris. What thoughts are mulling over for you after hearing the other talks this evening?
Well, I think to a large extent it's just it's so refreshing to hear people being positive. So much negativity going on. We're in the middle of a crisis, and that anything like that allows you to reinvent and to innovate. And I think what we've heard tonight has been really great examples of that, and the energy going into it as well. So I think it's I think both the other presentations were great, and I'm particularly interested in the library of things actually, and I'd love to make something like that work down here, so I may be in touch.
Great, thank you, Chris. Anita and Helen, what sticks in your minds from what you've heard this evening so far?
I think I was just really inspired by the practical projects that you're doing, and I wish we had more manpower. I want to do them all. I really like the library of stuff and the farmers market and the hops growers and the gleaning, and yeah, I'd just love to do all of those things.
Ditto what she said.
Nice, thank you very much. So Mike is helpfully putting some questions together that you've been putting in the chat in a document for me to start thinking about what we might be able to ask. Some of them will be general that I can invite you all to comment on, and some of them seem quite specific about some of the projects you've each presented about. So having heard from those of you presenting that the library of things is something that's really stuck in some people's minds, I might start with a question about that. And we've had a couple both talking about how do you get a library of things set up, the sense that there could be quite a high startup cost. So how do you get that set up when there's quite a high startup cost? Is there a less costly way of getting started? Over to you, Karen and Laura.
Well, it's not our project, but I'm speaking about it, and my partner Joe works within the Library of Things, and so it would be better if he was there. But so what we've done is partner with a group and their project is a Library of Things. They receive all their own funding, they get funding from many sources, and they have the relationships with all the companies to provide the things, and they have the expertise about maintaining the things, because actually it's quite complicated to have a library of things. It's not a simple thing. And they also open library of things in other places, and they're about to open in Brixton and Dalston and all sorts of places. So they're the people to approach, the library of things team. They provide the expertise on the things and how to lend the things. But then you need, and the funding, but you need a place and you need a community activator. So Joe is the community activator, and that's where that relationship with Transition Towns comes in. And it's because of that relationship it works. So you can find them on Instagram at Library of Things, or you can find them on a website and you can approach them.
Great, thank you so much. And I think some other people in the chat have been repping on that question as well, and offering some ideas. This one's for you, Chris. How do we engage with farmers for gleaning? What does that look like, and how do you get in there to move a ton of their vegetables away from them?
I think it's a difficult one. We were lucky, or maybe it's the best way to do it. But as I mentioned, feedback as an organisation is in the structure is up there, and we are down below there somewhere as a small hub. We worked with them earlier on, and that's where we got the initial contacts from. If you get yourself on the map as a hub, you can obviously approach local farmers, but it's really quite difficult. They're extremely busy people. They don't like people coming onto their farms and causing them something else to think about. So it is. I would suggest, if people want to get a hub up and running, that they contact feedback, and that's the first port of call, and then start going out to their local farmers and asking. And if anybody wants any help, we've got flyers which we sent out to farmers and things, which we can let you have.
Great, thank you, Chris. And part of what we're talking about here is network, so it's really useful to hear about a network that people can contact that has the specific knowledge on that. And I heard a kind of direct offer there as well of having flyers and stuff that you can share with people for how you might approach approach farmers.
I mean, it's interesting. Sorry, it's interesting that I'm actually getting people contacting me from London saying, "Can I come and join your gleans?" Which is environmentally not very good, but there's a lot of latent energy out there that can be.
Great, thank you, Chris. This question for our transition town Wellington folks. Interested to hear about the progress about purchasing the land for community growing.
We're not purchasing anything. Oh no, we are. No, this.
Well, I mean, essentially, we've been putting the fruit and nut trees on council-owned land, and essentially, I think the council are really overstretched and underfunded. And so, if there is a patch of unused green space that you know of around the corner from you, even if it's only a small area, so our smallest site is a herb bed. Next to a tiny car park with a couple of cherry trees in. The soil is pretty much non-existent, but it grows Mediterranean herbs really well. And so I think it's just a case of trying to find out if there's any unused green patch, and then seeing what you might be able to do with it, finding out who has it, because the council has some and highways department has others. And approaching them to how you might put your stuff on it. I found that the council is easier than highways department. Highways department asked us that we had to have a license of adoption, which was a bit of a form to fill in, and the council had to agree to hold it for us. But essentially the council, somewhere in the ethos, the council has to say all the land that they actually own, which I found out yesterday from speaking to somebody from the council. So you should be able to find out what they have, and then once you know that, then you can approach them and say, can we maintain it? And generally I find that because they haven't got enough resources, if somebody wants to do something amazing community project on it, then they're like, yeah, go for it.
And certainly the key thing, I think, to all of the successes that we've had, and the main takeaway on the difficulties that we've had, is the importance of involving the people around that site. So doing, literally knocking on doors and saying, hi, this is what we want to do. Do you like it? Do you not? That kind of community engagement's really, really key.
Great, that's really great. Thanks for that answer. So here's a question for all of you. We're living in really uncertain times. We're all having our own experience of the pandemic, of the lockdown, maybe of insecurity with work and all sorts going on. And of course that will be playing out individually, but also within our groups. So how are your groups maintaining their resilience in these uncertain times? I'll start by asking Karen or Laura from Crystal Palace, how is your group maintaining resilience in uncertain times?
So I'll speak for the market. The market is Karen and myself predominantly. We've been called a benevolent dictatorship at times before. So we're not a great big group of people who are making decisions. It's us two. And we are two of the original three. So it's been us all along. And we have worked through everything together. We've worked through not very good health, both of us. We've worked through crazy situations. And the strength of that has seen it through. And because there's two of us, one will be up, like the first couple of weeks were really, really hard. And I'd be just about losing my shit, and Karen would say, you know what, I'm okay today, I'll do it. And that strength and that experience has been the thing that's seen us through. And then with regards to all of our volunteers, our teams and our traders and things, it's just been a lot of talking, a lot of talking. And people have had deaths, they've had all sorts of things going on, and we have been, it's a bit like being a minister, we've just listened to all their problems and then supported each other's and then dumped on our boyfriends at the end of the day.
Yeah. And also the market itself now meets and people come and we all talk. So the market itself is a healing place for the whole community. It is like a church. And it's there every week, and if you need it, it's there, and you'll see people and you'll be able to talk, and people cry there. And so it's the market itself is a way of sustaining ourselves.
Thank you. What about down in Hythe? How is the Hythe group or other groups that you linked with, Chris? How are they maintaining resilience?
I think by concentrating on the things they can do rather than moaning about the things they can't do. I say that's really what the hops initiative was great, because you've got over 100 people in the community who are talking about something positive, and on the Gleaning, as we said, it's a whole network of people who know that there's good stuff going on, and you feel like you're doing something. And I think to stay positive, you need to be able to see some sort of result. So going for a bit of low-hanging fruit, as you'd say, in the Gleaning process, I think helps.
Great, thanks, Chris. What about down in Wellington? What's helping maintain your group's resilience?
Well, I mean, we've been meeting via Zoom and doing a lot of emailing and phone calls between us, but it's a shame in some ways that some people that don't have the technology or will to do another Zoom meeting, we're not seeing as much. And we're definitely missing meeting people in person, partly because of the chat that you get at the side of a meeting and the extra ideas that come along. But on the positive side, some of us have had more time to be doing things because we haven't been working so much. And we've gained some new members through sort of social media and Zoom and things during the time. So it's had its pros and cons.
I think one of the big pros that we found is setting up using WhatsApp. Actually, I don't know why we didn't do it like yonks ago, but we set up because we needed to find a way of empowering individuals to go out and work on our gardening projects and work on their local patches, which they could do themselves at the drop of a hat when they could do it, rather than waiting for a community gardening session, which is how it used to be. And also because of the numbers restrictions, you could go out with a friend or one or two people, and it's just proved to be a fantastic way of kind of devolving responsibility while still having a sense of your overall plan.
And getting the job done.
And getting a job done. Getting a job done is just the best thing ever. Like, you take a picture before and say, look at all this rubbish, and then you scythe like crazy, and you take another picture and say, look at what I did, and everyone goes, wow, that's fantastic. And it's just really, it's a great platform.
Thanks for that. This is another one for all of your groups. So we've heard about how intergenerational growing and community gardens can be. We've also heard about putting tabards on teenagers who are volunteering at the market. So this question is, how can a transition group engage with teenagers and young people in an equal way? I'll start with you, Karen and Laura.
Well, what we've found is that we have lots of teenagers, and we've been having teenagers volunteering in the market for what, five years. Yeah. And we have at least 8 teenagers a market volunteering, and we have rotas, and we have too many, so we have to schedule them. What we've found is that, first of all, there has to be something real for them to do, that they feel they've got a job. Secondly, they have to be getting something out of it. So we have levels of volunteers, and they have this ranking, and they got to a top volunteer, then they can get a job on a stall, and that's like seen as an amazing thing to do by the time they get up there. And they're always ranked, and we always try and help them with the things they're weakest at. So we work with the teenagers, we sort of mentor them. We mentor stall holders, we mentor teenagers. We love it.
We really love it. It's one of my favorite things. I'm sure it is for you as well. Like, we were talking about the Hythe thing, that it's more than the food. This is almost more than the food. The teenagers, it's really, really important to us. We have sessions at the end of the day where we ask them how their life is at the moment, and they might have a success and we celebrate with them, or they might have a problem, and then we them some advice from our viewpoint, but then we ask each of the others what would they do, and they're from all different backgrounds and they're of all different levels of mental health, and they really are a mixed bunch. And then they can kind of learn. They might be looking at some really cool rich boy thinking, and then seeing he's got a problem and thinking, actually, you know what, you know, we are kind of all the same, and they come up with really good solutions to help each other with their problems.
And in fact, two of the boys that work with and have been working with us actually were involved in a stabbing. They both got badly stabbed and both nearly died, and they've come back into the market and we've built them back up. Both are going to university now next year, and they're both thriving. They're both thriving. Yeah. But the market was a way of getting them back out of their houses, because they were both in hospital a long time.
Literally physically, because I drove and went and got one of them and said, look, come on, you're coming with me, and let's just go for half an hour and I'll take you home again. And all of that, we're kind of like the aunties, aren't we?
Yeah, we're like the aunties. And we've had so many teenagers through. We love working with young people. We love teenagers, and we just think not enough people work with them, and they just need attention and to be noticed and to be told, you're really good at this, actually. Did you know that? And they go, no. And then, what about this? And what have you learned? And how it's going to help them with their jobs. And we give references. We just love it. It's our favorite. It's literally our favorite bit.
I could really see that enthusiasm brimming in you. That's such a great question. You both just came alive as you were answering that. Chris, are you getting many young people engaging with Gleaning, and how are you working with them in a way that you know feels that they're being treated in an equal way and engaged with your group?
Well, I wish I could compete with the previous answer with that one. I think it sounds like you're doing a fantastic job. I think it's really difficult. We only just set up the hub in Hythe, and prior to that, the Gleans we were going out to, there were always kids there. And it's something they love doing. It's something that we really want to encourage, but with current COVID restrictions, it's really difficult to do. And I think it's something we're really struggling with down here. We work with the schools, we get kids out sowing wildflower meadows and trying to look after that, and that has a certain amount of success. But we've got a long way to go, and we haven't really broken into that too much, I have to admit.
Thanks, Chris. What about your experiences down in Wellington? What might you share for us?
Well, it's interesting when you say in an equal way. That's what the thing that stuck out. And it's we have done some work with kids and young teenagers doing things like building the habitats and sowing seed and things. But I think the things that have stood out that have been in an equal format have been one of the schools contacted us as they'd set up an environmental committee as part of the school, and they had introduced no plastic in the kitchens, and they had done another couple of initiatives within the school, and they contacted our group to say, what else can we do? And so they contacted us as an environmental group to ask for some guidance, and actually I think from that I ended up going and speaking to a load of A-level geography students, and that was a really nice open discussion, and there was some really thought-provoking conversation going on there, and interestingly it was something like the 13th of March, so it was really quick before lockdown, and one of the girls said about her dad was a pea farmer and couldn't find any people to pick the peas. Like, could we, essentially, it reminds me of Chris's Gleaning project, that it's an idea that we could maybe take forward in the future, picking harvests that can't be harvested. And we started talking about all sorts of problems that we have with food security in a very in-depth way. And, you know, these are the future, aren't they? These are the minds that we need to be inspired by, as well as the other way around.
Great, thank you. So we've only just got a few minutes left, so I think this will be the last question, and it's a big one, but don't feel like you have to give a big answer. But this whole week has been about thinking about where we're at, what's going on around us, to help inform solutions to to the current climate emergency, to inequality crisis, to the crisis of the pandemic. So how do you think the work that you've been doing and how you've been adapting during the pandemic, what solutions do you see in there that might help us towards the piece of the jigsaw we all have in tackling the climate crisis? It's a big question, but just, you know, it could be just a really short answer. But what about what you've been doing during the pandemic has unlocked for you some of what we need to be doing together to solve the crises that we're in? I'll start with you, Karen and Laura, first.
Yes, yeah. So one of the things that I've really loved is that we've been banging on about food security and environmental methods of farming and things for such a long time. And people thought we were mad. And now people are coming to us and they're going, there was no food in the supermarkets and it's a thing. And it's wonderful having people come down, people we've never seen before, who are now valuing our farms, they're valuing organic farming, they're valuing the short chain from the farm to the market. And I think that's really powerful because that is now being taken back to their families and also hopefully to the supermarkets. One of the things I've always said is that my goal is in our little world is we can influence a little small bit, but if we can influence the supermarkets and even a tiny bit, then that difference is huge. And that gives me hope, it really does.
Thanks. I'm seeing massive thumbs up from our Transition Town Wellington friends as well. Chris, have you got any thoughts on this topic?
I'd agree entirely with that. I mean, it's interesting, but I mean, when we're gleaning, the food which we brought back today is actually going out into food banks tomorrow. So people are getting really fresh food. They're eating things which they wouldn't normally have eaten, as food banks have a lot of difficulty getting hold of fresh veg normally. And I think that all goes towards getting people to value fresh fruit and fresh food more, to grow their own, because they can actually see it, and puts pressure on the supermarkets to deliver that. So I think that's all absolutely great stuff.
Thanks, Chris. And Anita and Helen, you were all thumbs up there. Briefly, what would your answer be?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with the food security aspect, definitely, because I mean, something that I learned a little while ago was that about 50% of global greenhouse gases are from industrial farming, and all those figures are built up from, you know, the transport, and we all know this, but from all aspects of this really fragile system. And I think a lot of people have realised how fragile that is, and their reliance on local food producers and their own growing their food in their garden. It's just wonderful in the thought that this might actually spark something good of more local food being produced, more allotments, more people growing their own, more people opening their eyes and learning and being able to be more self-sufficient. I really hope this is the takeaway. And the most popular things during lockdown, DIY things, cooking, gardening, projects, and I just think that's amazing that we can all maybe be a bit more self-sufficient than we were.
Thank you so much. I see there's a keenness for other comments to be made, but we're very nearly out of time. Anita, I'll let you sneak in there.
Yeah, no, just to add to that, because I agree with all of that stuff, but there's so much more than food in food. I mean, I think for me, the exciting thing about where we are at the moment is that people are now looking at the small plots of land, the interconnected gardens, looking at corridors. How do you build a large amount of space for wildlife when you don't have a large amount of space, unbroken space? Well, you jigsaw things together. You have a patchwork. And that's the only way that we as a species are going to be able to survive with other species, is if we build this patchwork out of what we have, instead of trying to dominate it either in terms of a city built environment or in terms of industrial agriculture. So for me, it's the little things that you can do, and it's the jigsawing, and it's the mycelium nourishing and taking nourishment from all the other little nodes. And so wildlife gardening is part of what we're doing as well, and making sure that things are permeable and messy and stuff has room to flourish. And that's people, and that's butterflies, and that's, you know, the soil. It's everything.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid I can't take any more comments because we're almost out of time. I've seen a few requests in the chat bar for if somebody could pop, maybe Mike or Richard can pop the links to Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays webinars in there, or at least to the Transition Towns YouTube channel, so that people can listen back to the previous webinars and this one once it's up. It should be up tomorrow. I just want to say a massive thank you to all of our amazing panelists tonight, to Karen, Laura, Chris, Anita and Helen. Truly thank you all. It's been really engaging, and you know, so much so that people probably want to keep talking for ages, and I'm really sorry that we're out of time, but I really hope everyone who's joined us today has found this as absorbing as we have. If any of you happen to be new to transition, please do check out the Transition Network website, transitionnetwork.org, regularly updated with news stories, guest blogs, stories from around the world of people doing transition. And you can also download for free our essential guide to doing transition. You can also follow us on social media. We're really active on there these days. So on Twitter, we are at Transition Towns, and on Facebook, we are at Transition Network. You can also keep up with this Transition Bounce Forward work on Facebook and Twitter. On Twitter, it's TT Bounce Forward and Transition Bounce Forward on Facebook. We will be announcing any future events related to this piece of work in Great Britain there.